Namaskar. My name is Vishal Mehra, and you have just tuned in to a brand new edition of the Indian Ad Geek. Our guest for this episode is Samit Malkani, the rare ad man who can decode both a brand's DNA and a quadratic equation, sometimes in the same meeting. Currently head of brand, social, and events marketing Southeast Asia for Google, Samit's career has zigzagged from crafting iconic TVCs and viral digital campaigns. Remember why this Kolaveri the? To pioneering data driven storytelling that makes even algorithms shed a tear. He's the creative mind who's as comfortable building trust for global tech giants as he's mixing metaphors, or rumor has it, even actual cocktails. Whether he's championing digital inclusion, leading award winning teams, or nerding out over the perfect headline, Summit Superpower is blending heart, humor, and hard data into brand stories that stick. So, ad geeks, buckle up. No, that's from the other podcast. But let's welcome the man who believes every great campaign starts with a question. Samit Malkani, welcome to the Indian Ad Geek.
Hey, Vishal, really good to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Samit, let's start from the very beginning of it all. Tell me, how did you fall in love with advertising?
Um, wow, that's like really taking me back, and I'm going to kind of show my age here, Vishal. But look, I think, for me, while I was a student, I was heading down a different path, more around IT. But the thing was that I was always a great writer. By the time I was done with my bachelor's, I'd pretty much won every single writing competition there was. And it was kind of, I mean, a professor kind of then like challenged me to make what I'm good at into a career. And it was either journalism or advertising. Now I've like always followed journalism and played that role early on in my life. But there was something about advertising that really attracted me towards it. And frankly, it was this, I had this like vision in my head of, eventually like sitting around with some friends, watching a cricket match, and then suddenly an ad comes on and everyone laughs and says, "What a fantastic ad." And I'm like, mine, mera kaam hai. And literally that is what got me into advertising because it was where else do you get paid to tell a joke on national television, right? And that's what pulled me in. And once I was in, courtesy a couple of really good internships, and then my first job at Lowland S, I didn't want to look back.
Out of curiosity, which was your first campaign which made you say, Mera kaam hai, while sitting with your friends?
I mean, it's so many. It was so far back, but I think about like some of the old Pepsi work from way back when. I think about some of the old. I think Fevicol really happened as I was just about getting into the industry. Um, I remember Thanda Matlab Coca-Cola came in just a year or two in and just like even you know further cemented the desire to do work like that. So
Wow.
there's too many such campaigns
All,
to
all,
think of.
all top of the line brands. Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic.
So, Samit, you're leading important responsibilities at Google. How did that come about? From advertising agencies to client side?
Honestly, Vishal, I never set out to go client side. Um, what happened was, I think, around 2009 is when I really discovered Google and I became a fan of the brand. Um, I love the fact that this is a company that is having such great impact on people's lives and doing some really cool shit along the way in terms of creative work. You know, and I always told myself, hey, if there's one client side org I want to go to, it should be Google. But I never took that seriously. But sometime in 2011, I don't know, I remember this very vividly. I was chilling in my room with my wife, and generally faffing on LinkedIn, and suddenly I see this role pop up for a brand lead for Google in Singapore. So I'm like, So I applied. Nothing came of it. Okay. But then 2 years later, and again, I remember this very vividly. I was in Delhi. A family member was in the hospital, and for a procedure, and I was there to kind of like help. And I was walking around in the hospital, and suddenly I get this email saying, "Hey, we're from Google, and we would like to talk." My first reaction was, "This has to be a scam," but it wasn't. And one thing led to another, and it turned out that they needed a brand lead for India to really kind of come in, build a consistent brand voice, really work with our agency partners to build some amazing campaigns, and the opportunity was just too good to resist. So several months and several interviews later, I found myself relocating to Delhi with my wife, and that was it. So I spent 3 years in our Gurgaon office, working on pretty much every single consumer product there was. Then I moved to Singapore to take on the India Southeast Asia portfolio, and several years later, I find myself like focused entirely on Southeast Asia, with some APAC stuff on the side. So yeah, it's been quite the journey, and definitely not what was on the planned career path when I started out.
Right. What all do you take care of? What are your exact responsibilities?
So my team I lead a lean team of brand marketers who come from diverse backgrounds, ranging from like social to big brand, brand teams, events, so on and so forth. And we work across our business, consumer, B2B, reputation marketing. We kind of like own our brand. We serve as the custodians of the brand and custodians of our creative bar. We take on some of our most critical projects. Lean team, we can't like work on everything, but then we work with our agency partners on critical key projects, whether it's like campaigns for our most high priority products, or our tent pole events that we do. We run our social handles for countries where we are investing heavily in social. So it's a wide range of responsibilities. One of the things that I'm also very focused on is how do we evolve and transform how we market, both keeping in mind the latest kind of marketing science that's coming out, but also given the shifts with AI.
And we will talk about AI later, though. You had mentioned Pepsi, Fevicol, and Coke, and all these phenomenal brands. Looking back, what were the defining moments or campaigns in your early career that set the tone for your approach to brand building?
I was fortunate, Vishal. Like I started my career at Low, and Low has always been an agency that believes in advertising that builds businesses. Okay, that builds strong brands with healthy bottom lines. And we have a great, you know, I say we, I still call it home to some extent, but the team has a great, track record in delivering highly creative, highly effective work. So I think mentally, when I entered, I think everyone was tuned to doing that kind of work. We weren't ever thinking about, hey, let's do something that's going to win at Cannes. If we win a creative award, that's like a little bit of icing on the cake. But we valued FEs, we valued effective work, we valued deep consumer insight. I don't know that there was one campaign, but I can definitely think of two. Um, in my early years, I spent some time, a couple of years, working on Johnson's Baby. I think I was probably one of the few, if not the only, male copywriter to do well on that brand. And it put me out of my comfort zone because I was single, I was nowhere close to being a father, and I had to like put myself into the persona of a mum and write for her. And that was really exciting. And that was really interesting and challenging. And it forced me to like develop and really think about um, putting our consumer first, and really going deep into their psyche and what matters to them, and finding ways to like bring that alive through our ads. I think the second was Tata Tea Jagore. I was fortunate enough, privileged enough to work on that campaign. I was pulled in after the idea was cracked, and for the first year, I served as like a one of the copywriters on the campaign. Second and third years, I think I worked more hands-on and led a lot of that, and that really shaped how I think about brands. Because here was a category and a brand that was stagnating. Tea, that was a time when CCD and barista were coming up, and coffee was beginning to eat into tea's share. And here was an opportunity to do something that was purposeful, but yet very connected to the brand, like very deeply rooted in the product and brand ethos. Um, and we found that doing that work not just elevated our brand, but allowed us to move the needle on market share. So that really those two brands, I look at those two as foundational in those years at Low. I do think over the years, though, as I moved into digital and social, and I got a chance to work on brands like Red Bull, Puma, Sony Music. I was I led the creative team that worked on Kolaveri way back when, and made that viral. And that taught me different aspects of brand building, and really kind of cemented this idea that the more talked about you are, the better your brand will do, or the better the campaign will perform. And really kind of cemented my thinking around social and the power of earned media. So it's been several campaigns, but like in my earlier formative years, I think these were the two or three experiences that really mattered.
Kolaveri D is going back years. Wow. As a marketeer, what was the role you played in making sure it got viral? Possibly the first viral hit of the country, if I remember correctly, breaking through cultural, language barriers, and whatnot. What was the challenge presented to you, Samit?
It's really interesting, and I will never claim sole credit for this. I think, kudos to Prashant Chalapalli, who's now with Havas, Shrikant Das, who's now an independent director. Shrikant was part of my creative team, and we used to look at Sony Music Social, and this was Sony Music South. And Shrikant one morning came up to me and said, "There's this song that they're releasing, and it's going to be great, and we should make something viral." I said, "Okay, cool. You understand the language, you understand the context." He chatted and he explained it a little bit to me, and we said, "All right, let's start developing a plan." But the real magic happened out of crisis. Now, what had happened was that Sony Music, I believe, had released the track, but not the video. And somebody went and made like a pseudo video using some spliced together imagery of the cast and put it out there. And that is detrimental, right? Because every media player wants to kind of drive more views and monetization from. So they called Prashant and they were like, "What do we do?" And PC said, "Let's just make our own video now. Let's just make a video." So very quickly, the filmmakers and Sony Music kind of turned around a video, and we married that with what Shrikant had in mind around making this part of culture, which was taking this idea of why this Kolaveri D, why this irrational rage, and like applying it to everyday situations. So we went on to Twitter, and at that time, like our social team, which I had the privilege of leading, we were able to get stuff trending in no time. Like we were that good, and this was the early days of Twitter in India. So we did what we did best, and before we knew it, the whole world was tweeting about it. Like from Mr. Bachchan to every comedian out there, and every celeb, and every random person, like talking about everything that pisses them off on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I mean that was the story, and that was the role we played. Like I said, I think it was PC, it was Shrikant, who drove a bunch of this, and I have to hand it off, hats off to like a great client, who really acted on this and like turned around a video quickly and gave us what we needed to um, really land this.
You have led brand marketing for Google across India and Southeast Asia, driving both product growth and brand love. What are the core principles you follow when telling a brand's story in such diverse markets?
When we talk about building our brand is intrinsically linked to our product experience. And it's critical, therefore, that we demonstrate that beautifully to build the brand, because it's rooted in trust, it's rooted in accessibility, ease of access. Um, Anybody can use any of our products for anything, across different languages, geographies, what have you, and a huge amount of trust in the fact that Google will give you good information, or really be helpful. And so therefore, I kind of shy away from doing stuff that is just very, very high level purpose that any other brand could do, and just try and make sure that our product is playing a very, very meaningful role. You're right that we handle a diverse set of markets, and I will not claim to understand markets like Indonesia or Vietnam or Thailand the way somebody who's born and brought up in that culture would. So a large operating principle is find a local insight, trust the local teams to validate it. They know their consumer and their culture better than I ever would. So trust, verify, whether that's through social listening or consumer research or what have you, but follow that lead a lot and then apply our global brand values and guidelines in that local context. So I think that is one of the core, in Google level principles that we look at. But the other is I'm very, very influenced by um, a lot of the modern marketing science that's been coming out of the last few years. Binet and Field, Byron Sharp, Orlando Wood. And I try to kind of follow a lot of those principles and influence my teams to do that. And we've had, some really good success when we've applied some of that. We've done work that highly talked about, and we can see the impact on the results. We've applied some really sharp frameworks, and some thinking. We go social by default in Southeast Asia because you can't do campaigns in SEA without like leading with social, just given the media landscape and ecosystem. Yeah, that's and look, at the end of the day, I want the work to be talked about positively. So I'm always looking to start a positive conversation around the brand, in any way possible. It's not just about the campaigns either, Vishal. It's also about what we're doing every single day on social to stay top of mind, to be spoken well about. So there's multiple things that come together, and that's how I would kind of approach not just Google but any brand today.
Staying on that, how do you ensure your local campaigns cut through the clutter and truly resonate with audience? Especially considering how our media landscape is so noisy, and it has been noisy for a long time like that. I was reading the other day, an average consumer sees what, 20,000 brand messages every day in different forms. So how do you ensure that you cut through the clutter?
By the skin of my teeth. Um, no, but jokes apart, look, it's really hard. You hit the nail on the head. I think there's so much clutter out there. And I wish there were a magic formula. There isn't. If there were, I think I'd be a billionaire. But I think what we really strive to do is get a powerful insight, um, and something that resonates with everybody. We try to find a good cultural connection wherever we can. One of the frameworks that I discovered, I think back in 2020 or 2021, and first tried out in India when I was still looking after that market, was Jonah Berger's STEPS framework. Professor Berger is the author of the book Contagious. It's a must read, in my view, for every marketer. And he outlines a framework called STEPS, um, which is basically 6 tactics to use to try and fuel virality. And it's something that I've trained my teams on. And every time we've consciously tried to apply it, I think we've seen different thinking. Like it's become, I think, so rooted in us that we may not actually know that we're applying it, but I see my teams practicing some of those things almost every day unconsciously, whether they know it or not. And I think that gives us a higher chance of success. I will not say that everything that we do is magical and cuts through, but I do believe that it gives us a better chance of success. And I think more and more it's also about blurring the lines between entertainment and advertising. The more entertaining you can make your work in general, the better. Entertainment, useful, helpfulness, or informative. So we're trying to find that hook every single time.
And that leads me to my next question. In your experience, how do you balance the need for short term performance with long term goal of building a strong trusted brand?
Yeah. I want to debunk this myth that it's an either or. It's not. It's both. I don't think you can do without one or the other. And if you read like Binet and Field's seminal study called The Long and Short of It, they prescribe that ratio, right, of brand building investment to short term performance investment. I think there's more studies that have come in since then that actually show exactly how much um, a brand building effort impacts short term performance. Um, so to me, both go hand in hand. Again, I think with us, given that our brand is rooted in our product experience, one thing kind of naturally leads to another. So as we're thinking about campaigns, most of the time we're trying to think about the full flywheel. You know, don't just like get the attention and drive the engagement, but also find a path to conversion and advocacy at the end of the day. So I don't believe it's one or the other. I think it's both, and we every brand has to figure out what is the right model for them.
How do you bring together human insights, data, and technology to drive creativity and effectiveness within your teams, Samit?
The interesting part is like I started my career as a copywriter, Vishal. But people used to always tell me that I should be a planner instead. And somewhere I think on this side, I can apply both skills. So one, I pay a lot of attention to data. So I'll give you one example, right? I think, over the last couple of years, we've built a really robust social media setup for Southeast Asia. And we're extremely data rich. Like we track our content at a post level, but very, very granularly. Um, and we're constantly looking at that data. We're constantly looking to figure out what we can do better, what's working, what's not, what are the signals that we're seeing. We recently did an analysis to understand what are drivers of what kind of engagement. So what drives saves, what drives comments, what drives shares, and the findings were very eye opening. And that is a study that we're now kind of scaling across our APAC organization as well. But you see what I mean, right? Like immediately you start getting signals to say, all right, push more here, dial back here. And you can just keep optimizing and improving and using that data. That's one way of doing it. But apart from social data, there's a lot of like insight as well. Um, we rely on multiple factors, right? I think we use social listening hugely to get our finger on the pulse and really understand what's going on. So that gives us a lot of sense of what people really think and feel. Look, I have a healthy skepticism of surveys. um, India experience, Southeast Asia experience has taught me that we tend to be more positively biased in surveys than real. But what you put out there on social is pretty much what you think and what you want the world to see about you. And that is, therefore, to me, a very good barometer of our audiences and how they're feeling. So I look at social insights, I look at social data to provide insights. I might look at other ways, like human experience or just like personas and trying to like dig deep and to really understand them better. Last year, I kind of like built out this framework, to be more human centric and find like, and it basically allows me to look at a person or a consumer or a customer from 9 different angles. And it's a framework I try to like bring alive every single time. I've literally built a gem in Gemini, our AI tool, to kind of like help me get this out better. So it just like helps, it's good to look at it from various angles, and that's how we kind of derive a bunch of insights and ideas. In terms of tech, um, look, I think there's two things I'll touch on. One is platforms, and given the fact that we work with YouTube, we work with other digital platforms like be it Instagram or TikTok or what have you. I think the platforms are constantly evolving, and we need to stay on top of that. So we need to read those signals well. We also need to know what features are coming in so that we can maximize those. And if you follow Adam Mosseri, I think he's been really open about what are the drivers of the Instagram algorithm, or how you can improve your performance. So I think paying attention to those kind of things helps. Um, the other tech, of course, that everyone's talking about is AI, and I think we're beginning to really explore how we can utilize AI to help us with research, help us with brainstorming, um, and then potentially at some point we will really get into AI deployment on which we are still figuring out. So I think we're still somewhere in this at some point in this messy journey that we're still learning and growing. But I hope that answers the question that you had.
Yeah, I want to talk about insights and social and AI. But before all that, can you talk a bit more about the model you have developed? You just mentioned that.
What I'll say is it's a synthesis of many different things I've learned. I was at South by Southwest Austin last year and attending a bunch of talks, and human centricity is on everyone's minds. From B2C to B2B marketers, everyone's trying to think of their audience not just as somebody with a wallet, but as a person. And um, there's a lot that I learned about experiential, for example, and some of the science behind it. And I kind of put all of that together into this human centric framework. I've written about it in extensive detail on my blog. So if you don't mind a little shameless plug, if you go to www.whatisaninsight.com, you'll find a story there about the human centric framework, and a lot of detail. But essentially, it's about consumer insights. It's about figuring out what is novel to this person. What is the headline that might actually grab this person's attention? It could be about thinking about what might transport this person out of their day to day
The
monotony.
day-to-day rut. Okay, yeah.
Yes, and pull them out, and therefore what kind of experience might you want to build around that, in terms of activation or event. um, you might it challenges you to think about what are the barriers and problems that they're facing in their day-to-day life. So it's several different entry points into somebody's mind. The gem I built was to just like, I was playing with Gemini and like saying, can it actually help? And I found it's helpful, um, to at least spark some thoughts. It may not be 100% accurate, but at least it will give me something.
Yeah, I think so often what you need is just a spark. And I've observed AI can be helpful. It won't do the job for you, but it will maybe take you in a certain direction, give you a kickstart, and then, of course, it's up to the user. Let's stay on your blog for a bit. Yeah, I was reading something you wrote about big holding company agency model and Mark Reed the other day. Control all delete. Would you like to share some of your thoughts with our listeners?
Yeah, look, this is really close to my heart. And that post wasn't necessarily about Mark Reed, but it's just generally about what I've been seeing in advertising over the last couple of years, and it's now beginning to come to the fore. I genuinely feel I will never be in the camp of saying advertising is dead or the ad agency is dead. No, hell no. But does it need some rethinking? Hell yes. Um, Look, I think if you just track back, right, it's not one problem that agencies face. It's like a flywheel, a perfect storm of problems. I think it starts with establishing value. Ever since the separation of creative and media, which happened just as you and I were getting into the business, um, I think creative agencies have struggled to explain the value that they drive. And I've been part of several pitches, both on the delivering end as well as on the receiving end. And it comes down to, hey, here's the idea, and here's the team that is going to deliver the idea for you. But that's not the question that marketers are being asked in the boardroom to justify their investments in marketing and advertising. The questions are, what are the outcomes? What is the connection back to business? So I feel like agencies have a lot to do to actually like come from an outcome and value lens to a client versus here's an idea. That directly helps them prove or justify a revenue model. Everyone knows, right? Like, it started off as as a commission on media spend. So you're not actually paying the agency for the value of the idea. You're just giving them a cut of what you're spending on media. Then it moved to this consulting style model of saying, hey, this is how much the man hour cost is, and let's bill basis that. But the truth is that there's far more value that advertising can deliver to a business than can be accounted for just by man hours. I feel very strongly that eventually advertising agencies and marketers need to come to an outcome based model where you're kind of like giving the agency, you're holding the agency accountable to the outcomes that they deliver for the brand and the business. Whether that outcome is, a particular number of leads generated, or percentage point uplift in brand, what have you. I think models have to be developed to allow that. Once you've cracked the revenue model, you can solve the talent crisis. And the talent crisis is not just about pay, it's hugely about actually finding the right people who give a damn about advertising. I was in a chat with an Indian agency CCO, who's a good friend, and he summed it up beautifully when he said that half the people in advertising don't want to be in advertising. They want to go and write a film in Bollywood, and they want to go and be like artists and sculptors, and that's all good, but like you've got to care about the business of commercial creativity. I'm a genuine believer in that. I personally have never wanted to go and write a script, but if you look at, if you look at it, there are some folks who managed to successfully balance it. Balki comes to mind, right? He was always interested in writing, but what he did was I don't think he ever lost the passion for advertising while he was at Low. And he never gave us a hint that he had ever lost that passion. He was still churning out incredible work and leading, incredible teams while he was at Low. So he never lost that passion for commercial creativity. And I feel like more and more, um, you know, we need to kind of find the folks who care about this, who think as much about cracking a great, YouTube Shorts idea as they would about cracking a 4 minute tearjerker that would play twice on national television. So that kind of sums it up. And once you've cracked the talent crisis, by finding the right talent, by paying them well, you are again able to offer value. So that's a flywheel I kind of outline, and you can read more about it on my blog for anyone who's interested.
Based on that, what advice would you give to marketers struggling to justify brand investments in a performance driven world we find ourselves in?
Look, it comes down to measurement, okay, and how you're able to measure impact. I would say that if you're struggling, maybe you need to step back and look at newer ways of measuring it. Look at the science. Again, I mentioned some of the names. I personally like what System One Group are actually proposing. They've kind of built their brand health model based on three parameters: fame, feeling, and fluency, which is very, very rooted in what the evidence suggests. I like that model. And do you need to kind of like take that model and sell it? Do you need to find another model and sell it internally? You need to find a way to measure, but you need to come at it from a more modern perspective, uh, than maybe old time. I think I'm not a measurement expert for sure. I'm a big fan of folks like Avinash Kaushik. Um, and I would genuinely suggest like maybe dive deeper into his work, dive deeper into the work of companies that are figuring out how do we really show the long term effects of brand on the business. You'll have to find a new way essentially to justify it. Not going to be easy, but we're all going through that journey right now.
Long term work. It all starts with insights. You spoke about how you trust your local teams to figure out relevant insights. Is there a process you have adopted to farm the right kind of insights?
I think that varies, Vishal, campaign to campaign, project to project. Sometimes it could come just from observation of human life and patterns. Sometimes it could come from looking at search trends and social data and kind of like bringing the two together. That's helped us on multiple occasions. I mean, we've done some fantastic work, especially around Ramadan in Indonesia, using those two as starting points. Um, and look, we do have like rigorous creative processes, and this is where my CMO and I spend the most amount of time when questioning. Like, have we gotten the user insight right? Are we sharp enough? Are we clear enough to the agency that we know which direction that we want to go in? Um, so yeah, I mean that's how we try and look at it. We do look at research, of course. There's still a huge role for primary research, but largely I think it's these three areas. human observation, search and social data, and and then research.
I hope I don't come across as a villain for saying this, but so often data can be turned in the way you want, right? So often you have to rely on your gut, on your instincts, or fall back on people having local market insights, local market knowledge, like you had mentioned.
No, look, you're right that data can be manipulated, and this comes down now to the intellectual integrity, frankly, of the person who's working on that data. Um, it's never easy to go in with a blank slate, but I found that the best marketers actually do that. They're very objective, and I've had to learn that the hard way. Um, the advice I would give is, look, think of it as a learning experience, right? Either you will be proven right in your hypothesis, which will be a great ego boost, confidence builder, all of that, or you will learn something new because you'll have been proven wrong. And you have to be willing at this moment in time to be proven wrong so that you can learn and grow. It demands a level of intellectual honesty and integrity, and we all have to build that.
Summit, do you see social media marketing being active, 5 years from now? Or do you see different forms and interfaces of advertising taking its place? As somebody, as someone leading the charge on social, what's the future you see?
I wish I knew, Vishal. I don't have a great answer to that. Do I believe that it will continue? Yes. People love talking, people love showing off, people love creating content to inspire, inform, educate, help others. And as long as they're able to monetize that content, those platforms will exist. What shape they will take, I don't know. Um, I do feel like, for me, if I think about social and social platforms personally, very, very personal opinion, I think the future is with platforms like Reddit that really balance interests with community moderation. Each community has rules that are appropriate for itself, and very actively engaged mods who police it and make sure that nothing goes down that shouldn't be going down. It can get controversial, but so can all social. I'm not a big fan of highly sanitized social, but neither am I a fan of social that just lets every viewpoint propagate as if it were all the same and all true. I feel Reddit is a beautiful balance at this point of time and can be incredibly helpful. So yeah, if yeah, I feel like that is the direction in which it'll all eventually go.
I love Reddit, by the way. I was reading few days back how Sachin has been made the brand ambassador, and I was wondering, when did this platform got so mainstream?
He got a follow. I joined his community. I followed him immediately. Big Sachin fan here, and yeah, um, it's Reddit is my guilty pleasure, and I'm sure that of like so many others as well.
Samit, you have built and led creative teams at scale, and we were just talking about getting the right kind of talent. People who love our business, people who love advertising, people who really care about this. To be honest, when folks like you and I, we started our career, advertising was considered as a cool profession, right? Now kids have so many more options, so many great options. What do you look for when you are hiring creative talent?
I haven't built an agency side creative team for 11 years, but maybe I'll answer that
From a Google perspective.
from where I sit right now,
Yeah.
which is leading a team of brand marketers who are like specialists who have had this kind of experience. So one, you're right, passion for the business is key, and really being interested in advertising and doing good advertising. I look, obviously you look for expertise. You want somebody who can roll their sleeves up and get stuff done. There have been numerous times when our agency partners, maybe if they're stuck, where my team and I have had to get our hands messy, and we love it. We'd rather the agency have like cracked it when we brief them to do it, but we understand it's sometimes difficult and challenging, so you get involved, and it's your work as much as theirs, right? So I look for people who want to get their hands dirty as well. What I really look for are, I would say, creativity, integrity, and an ability to learn. And I'll maybe start with integrity because that's a very, like, for me, it's the number one personal value. I look for people with high integrity, people who will take responsibility for mistakes, learn from them, and move forward. People who aren't afraid to stand up and voice a difficult topic or a different opinion. Creativity. I want folks who will think a little differently, who will either find different ways to apply their skills or find lateral solutions sometimes. But the biggest one I think is learning today, Vishal. Like, the world is changing around us. Um, I was at South by Southwest London a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said there that marketing has gone through more change in the last 5 years than it did in the previous 50. Starting with the COVID pandemic and moving on to this age of AI that we're going through, um, the evidence that's coming out and how the face of marketing itself is being shaped. Um, Adaptability, the ability to learn new skills and you know navigate different situations is going to be critical. So those, I would say, are my top three skills that I look for over and above the expertise that they're able to bring.
During the course of this interaction, I've observed how you love being a student of advertising.
Oh yeah.
And I think that
So yeah.
speaks a lot about you. I think that's something critical to be kept in mind always. That's what the great man also said, right, Sachin? That I will forever be the student of the sport. Keep that curiosity and hunger alive.
It's strange that you say that. I was actually hugely inspired by Sachin's biographies and autobiography because he talks about constantly trying to like get better and like improve every single day and not just rely on static God-given talent, but actually invest and like work hard at it. I've been hugely inspired by Rahul Dravid as well for the same reason. Like, may not have had the same amount of natural talent as Sachin, but made, oh my God, like elevated it to another degree.
Hard worker. Hard work
Exactly.
trumps everything.
And students of the game, I think that really kind of like stayed with me. That idea of just constantly trying to learn and get better. Um i i hugely believe in it, and I'm constantly trying to like do it myself and get my teams to do it too.
And Sachin did not just learn about batting and cricket, more about batting and cricket. He started learning more and more about human anatomy, especially once he was diagnosed with tennis elbow. So it's really amazing to follow and learn more about the attitude of these great personalities. So much to learn.
Impact.
Vishal, the parallel, actually, the way I see it is, it's not just about advertising and marketing that you have to study, but you've got to think about many other things around it, right? You got to get better at, for example, navigating ambiguity. You've got to get better at leadership. You've got to get better at stakeholders. You've got to get better at regulating your own emotion because you know people have passion, and you got to kind of like approach stuff more dispassionately. You got to get better at investing in yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and take care of yourself. So I've become a huge like proponent of work-life balance over the years, or just like investing in fitness and general health. So it's you have to keep learning about so many different things to fuel what you do. And again, that's another reason why Sachin's story really stands out to me.
How do you see AI reshaping creative processes and marketing strategy in the next few years?
I will admit that some days I feel like I'm behind the curve, and some days I feel like I'm not. I think it's already reshaping stuff, and I feel like the faster we stop talking about AI as the buzzword and just accept it and move forward, the easier it will be for all of us, very honestly. How is it shaping creative processes? I was reading this study by The Drum, and they speak about some of the roles and how AI will affect roles. And there's a huge fear that junior level roles will be very seriously impacted by AI. But I read another take on this, which was actually coming from an accounting firm. I think it was one of the big four consultancies or whatever. But they were finding that they didn't need to hire junior analysts to do the junior analyst role before. Actually, the junior analyst, with the help of AI, was doing stuff that they would have otherwise done only 3 years into their career. To me, I see that as one of the biggest unlocks. Even a junior art director can operate like a CD, like a creative director, because they've now got tools to help them do that. I think that's one big unlock. Every one of us can operate at the next level or two levels above and raise our own bar. That is the first, I think, shift that I think I want to kind of like share about. I think the second is speed to market. Um, Look, the world of marketing is just getting more fast paced day by day, and we all need to kind of adapt. And I can see us using AI to actually like get to ideas faster, whether it's using like a VO3 to develop a prototype that you then sell to a client to then produce, or take that same output and put it out as a part of your daily content on socials and stuff like that in response to a quick urgent ask. So you can see speed to market improving. Like I recently used Canvas on Gemini to vibe code um, a mock-up for a dashboard, and that helped me brief an agency 10 days earlier than I would have otherwise. And that made a huge amount of difference, right? Like 10 days saved. I've got great brains thinking about it on the other side to think about the data that will go into the pipe, um, and how this should be set up and solved and what operations are needed. So I've got them immediately thinking, and we're suddenly moving faster and on an accelerated timeline. So I feel like speed is the other one. But finally, I think for me, I look at it as a huge like tool for research and brainstorm. I use deep research a lot, but I also like to kind of like jam with it, whether it's to think about frameworks and models to solve problems that we're facing, or whether it's, hey, what do you think of this idea? How do we make it better? And I look at it as this non-judgmental other brain in front of me that is going to just give me some critique, throw some different sparks my way. Eventually, it's my job to connect the dots. But maybe it gives, instead of having two ideas to begin with, which would have come from me, I now have 20 ideas to play with. So I see those as some of the big value adds. Um, Look, I want to be candid as well. I'm fairly certain it's going to be a difficult process to adopt, and there's going to be some changes, I guess, along the way. And this is a very personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the company here, but um, yeah, I think overall, like I see more positive than negative at this point of time.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you are. What are the biggest trends shaping the future of advertising, according to you, Samit?
Right now, I think everything I wrote about in my blog post is where it is. We're seeing the literal collapse of the holding company model. We're seeing far more independent agencies start up, and do well.
Sorry to cut you, but somehow Publicis seems to be doing really well, right?
I think they're
It's
the
an
only
outlier.
ones. But even they have, I think, reported revenue declines, if I'm not mistaken, over the last couple of years. I think Publicis are definitely the outlier. But by and large, if you look at it, whether it's Omnicom IPG, whether it's WPP, whatever, there's a lot of chaos happening right now. I'm not saying they won't find an evolution forward. I just think there's a lot of turmoil right now. I think that something has to change in advertising and to enable marketers. And I think that's the biggest trend that I'm expecting to see from an industry perspective. I don't want to talk about AI anymore, which is why I'm not talking about that.
Something you mentioned earlier, outcome based pricing. That should be a critical part of it all.
It should be. Um, Look, I think agency margins have been getting squeezed over the years. Frankly, it's hard to like hire talent and like build a true meritocracy when you're that squeezed. And that contributes to the dismal working conditions, working hours, all of that agencies go through. So they need to have skin in the game, um, which is why I think outcome based remuneration will matter. What those models look like, I'm not the expert, but I know it's something that many people are thinking hard about, and I know some brands have figured it out. I'm sure eventually the industry will move towards that because it's the only way for that side of the business to sustain.
I had Gotham in the last episode, and this is something he spoke about extensively.
I would expect them to kind of take the lead in this. They're very, very progressive.
Right. We spoke about Reddit some time back. If you'll put on your marketeer hat, what new advertising formats or platforms do you believe are underutilized by brands today?
I don't know whether this is underutilized, but if I were to bet, I'd bet on YouTube. Just look at just look at the potential. It's everywhere. Um, I was reading a story on Adweek and even Semaphore, where they're reporting about how in the streaming wars, YouTube has quietly gone ahead and like taken built a really strong position for itself. Um, I think that reach and engagement is unparalleled. So for me, I I, I would actually bet on YouTube as an advertising platform in the coming years.
There is plenty of advertising on YouTube, Samit.
I
I'm
know that's why I
sure
said
you
it's not
have the premium
underutilized, but
model, but
I that's why I said it's not about underutilization, but it's about where I would still
you see a
bet.
lot of innovation being done there.
I think so. I think like huge amount of authentic, trusted, big name creators of all scales, very very diverse audiences, not just restricted to one audience set or two audience sets. Um, the ability to measure impact and performance, I think, which is exactly what marketers are looking for, and high trust, brand safety. I think there's so many dots that YouTube connects.
All right. Last question. I feel this is going to be interesting as you are a student of the craft. What's the most important lesson you have learned as a leader in the advertising and brand marketing space?
You touched upon it. It's related to being a student. Look, don't be arrogant. Never believe that you've learned it all. I've consciously stayed away from hiring people who write things like "I'm a social media ninja" or "social media expert" or "brand marketing guru" in their CVs, because I believe that their attitude will be more negative towards improving constantly. The moment you get to that space, you're done. This world is changing way too fast. So you need to kind of really keep your eyes and ears open, learn from the people around you, learn from every opportunity that you can, like invest in studying. If you're making, literally take some of your salary, put it into courses, make yourself better. That's like your investment that's going to pay off over the years.
Samit, it's been wonderful chatting with you. I really do appreciate all your time. I've learned so much sitting down with you for the past hour or so.
No, Vishal, thank you. I think like, and I'm not just saying this, but genuinely, this has been one of the most fun podcast experiences I've had. So really, really appreciate you having me on the show.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Indian Ad Geek. Huge thanks to Samit for taking us on a whirlwind tour through the wild, witty, and wonderfully weird world of brand storytelling. Samit's insights reminds us that the best ads aren't just seen, they are felt. And sometimes even sung. Next week, get ready for the Indian Av Geek. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave us a review, share it with somebody who might enjoy it. The Indian Ad Geek streams on all major podcast apps. Samit is at Summit on X, and I am at Vishal One Mehra. Until next time, keep your creative antennas tuned, your data dashboards ready, and your ad geek flag flying high. Stay quirky, stay curious, and keep geeking out.